He's breaking into my house. Vivian Baxter storms my porch with a fake master key she bought online, screaming it opens every house in her neighborhood. When her glowing green toy couldn't even fit my lock, she dialed 911, claiming I threatened her. But the dispatcher who answered, let's just say Vivian had no clue who she was really talking to. What happened next destroyed her entire HOA empire in one phone call. I said, drop a comment where you're watching from. This revenge is perfect. The evening started like any other Tuesday in our modest two-story house on Maple Street. Dylan and I were digging into takeout Chinese food, the kind where the sweet and sour sauce comes in those little plastic packets that never tear properly. My son was home from his shift, and we were catching up about his day when an envelope slid under our front door with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The bright yellow HOA letterhead practically screamed trouble before I even picked it up. $500 for a fence violation. Apparently, my perfectly normal wooden fence was 3 inches too tall, according to subsection 12B of the Fairview Heights Homeowners Guidelines. I crumpled the paper and tossed it onto the counter, muttering something unprintable about bureaucratic nonsense, while Dylan shook his head and stabbed at his orange chicken with unnecessary force. Then came the pounding. Not knocking, pounding, like someone was trying to break down the door with their bare fists. Through the peephole, I saw Vivian Baxter in all her glory. Oversized designer sunglasses despite the setting sun, a glittery handbag that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage, and that ridiculous neon green key dangling from her manicured fingers like some kind of talisman. She was dressed in what I can only describe as suburban warfare attire. A blazer so stiff it could stand on its own, and heels high enough to qualify as weapons. Her platinum blonde hair was sprayed into submission, not a strand daring to move in the evening breeze. "Open up, Ryan Caldwell," she shrieked, her voice carrying across the neighborhood like a siren. "I have the master key that opens 90% of homes in this development, and I'm not afraid to use it." I opened the door just enough to block her entry with my body. "Evening, Vivian. What brings you to my doorstep besides delusions of grandeur?" Behind me, Dylan had gone quiet, but I could feel his presence, probably recording on his phone like the smart kid he was. Vivian thrust the key forward like she was presenting Excalibur itself. The thing was practically radioactive green, the kind of color you'd see on a Halloween decoration or a particularly aggressive energy drink. "This," she announced, with the gravitas of someone unveiling the cure for cancer, "is a universal master key. I purchased it from a very reputable online security firm. It can open any standard residential lock, and since you've ignored my notice about your fence violation, I'm here to conduct a thorough inspection of your property for additional infractions." The absurdity of the situation would have been funny if it weren't so infuriating. I crossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe, making myself as immovable as possible. "That's fascinating, Vivian. Did this reputable online security firm also sell you a bridge in Brooklyn? Because that key looks like something from a glow-stick factory." Her face flushed red beneath her makeup, and she actually tried to insert the key into my lock. It didn't even fit properly. The thing was too thick and the wrong shape entirely. She jiggled it frantically, muttering under her breath about defective products and online reviews, while I watched with a mixture of amusement and disgust. "Ma'am, you need to leave my property," I said firmly, keeping my voice level despite the anger bubbling in my chest. "You have no legal right to enter my home, master key or not." That's when she pulled out her phone with a flourish that would make a magician jealous. "We'll see about that. I'm calling the police right now. You're threatening me. This is harassment. I'm the HOA president, and you're preventing me from doing my duties." She dialed dramatically, each button press accompanied by a theatrical gasp or sigh. Behind me, Dylan's phone buzzed, and I heard him slip away to his room. I didn't think much of it at the time, figured he was just giving us space for the impending drama. "Swan, what's your emergency?" The voice on her speakerphone was calm and professional. Vivian launched into a tirade that would have been impressive if it weren't completely fabricated. Yes, hello, this is Vivian Baxter, president of the Fairview Heights Homeowners Association. I'm at 47 Maple Street, and the homeowner, Ryan Caldwell, is threatening me. He's being aggressive and won't let me perform my lawful duties as HOA president. I need officers here immediately. I remained silent, knowing that anything I said would just fuel her performance. What I didn't know was that 3 blocks away at the emergency dispatch center, my son Dylan was listening to every word with a grin spreading across his face. The dispatcher's response was interesting, to say the least. "Ma'am, can you describe the nature of the threat? Are you in immediate physical danger?" Vivian stumbled over her words, clearly not expecting to be questioned. "Well, he's standing there menacingly, and he called my master key fake." There was a pause, then, "Ma'am, did you say master key? Can you tell me more about this key? Is it registered with the National Locksmith Guild?" I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing. Vivian's face went through a spectacular range of emotions: confusion, indignation, and finally flustered panic. "The what? I don't. It's from masterkeysdirect.com. They said it was guaranteed to work." Another pause. "Ma'am, I need to know the make and model of this key for our records. We've had reports of fraudulent locksmith tools being sold online." Vivian actually dropped her designer bag, scattering its contents across my porch. Lipsticks rolled in every direction, and what looked like at least 3 different HOA citation pads spilled out. "I don't understand what the make and model. It's just a key, a master key, the website said." She was stomping now, her heels clicking against the concrete like angry castanets. Through all of this, more neighbors had started to peek out from their windows and doors. I saw curtains twitching and faces appearing behind glass, everyone eager to witness Vivian's latest power trip. The woman herself seemed oblivious to her growing audience, too focused on arguing with the dispatcher about the legitimacy of her glow-stick-colored key. My phone buzzed with a text. "Dylan. Got this. Dad." That's when I realized what was happening. My brilliant, slightly devious son was handling this call from his dispatcher's desk. Part of me wanted to tell him to transfer it to someone else to avoid any potential conflict of interest, but a bigger part, the part that had dealt with Vivian's tyranny for the past 2 years, wanted to see where this would go. Vivian was now pacing in front of my house, gesticulating wildly as she tried to explain to the dispatcher why she absolutely needed to enter my home right this very moment. Her voice carried across the neighborhood. "This is about maintaining standards, property values, the integrity of our community." As sirens began to wail in the distance, Vivian suddenly stopped pacing. A slow, calculating smile spread across her face as she reached into her bag and pulled out a small camera. She positioned it carefully, aiming it at my front door, at me, at the approaching police lights. Whatever she was planning, I had a sinking feeling that her ridiculous master key was just the beginning of tonight's drama. The question was, what kind of scene was she preparing to stage for her little camera? And how was I going to protect myself and my son from whatever scheme she was cooking up? Officer Greg Turner stepped out of his patrol car with the weary expression of someone who dealt with Vivian Baxter one too many times. He was a veteran cop, the kind with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes that deepened when he saw her standing there with her camera. I recognized him from previous neighborhood disputes. He'd always been fair, but tonight something felt different. Vivian immediately launched into victim mode, twisting a lace handkerchief she'd produced from somewhere and dabbing at completely dry eyes. "Officer Turner, thank goodness you're here," she said, pointing at me with a trembling finger that would have been convincing if I hadn't seen her pull the same act at 3 different HOA meetings. "This man has been terrorizing me. Look what he's done to this neighborhood." She whipped out her phone with the speed of a gunslinger and showed Turner a photo that made my jaw drop. There on her screen was an image of a house with a neon pink fence, the kind of color that would make your eyes water from 50 feet away. The problem was, it was supposedly my house, except the house number was wrong, the windows were in different places, and I'm pretty sure my maple tree hadn't spontaneously transformed into a palm. But in the growing darkness, with just the porch lights and street lamps, Turner squinted at the photo, and his expression shifted from skepticism to concern. His brow furrowed as he looked between the phone and my perfectly normal brown fence, and I could see him trying to reconcile what he was seeing. "Mr. Caldwell," Turner said, his voice carefully neutral, "I'm going to need you to explain your side of this. Mrs. Baxter is claiming you violated multiple HOA regulations, and that you threatened her when she tried to address them." Behind him, Vivian was doing her best impression of a wronged Victorian lady, clutching her handkerchief and swaying slightly as if she might faint at any moment. The camera she'd set up was still recording, its red light blinking like a malevolent eye. I took a deep breath, clenching my jaw to keep my temper in check. "Officer, I've lived here for 15 years. That photo she's showing you is doctored. Look at the house number. It says 53, but I'm at 47. And since when do I have palm trees in Ohio?" Turner's frown deepened as he looked at the photo again, holding Vivian's phone up to catch the streetlight. More neighbors had emerged from their houses now, forming small clusters on their lawns and driveways. I saw Henry Walsh from 2 doors down, leaning on his fence, his weathered face set in a scowl as he watched Vivian's performance. Sofia Alvarez was on her porch with her daughter, both of them shaking their heads. The whole street was bearing witness to this circus, and Vivian seemed to be reveling in the attention. "Officer," she said, her voice rising to ensure everyone could hear, "Mr. Caldwell has been a problem ever since he questioned my authority at the last HOA meeting. He challenged my fence regulations in front of everyone, trying to undermine my position. He's just like that horrible man who lived here before, always causing trouble, always questioning everything." Something clicked in my mind. 2 years ago, Vivian had gotten into a massive dispute with the previous owner of my house, an elderly man named Frank Morrison, who'd fought her on every petty rule she tried to impose. He'd eventually moved to Florida, but not before very publicly calling her out for misusing HOA funds at a packed community meeting. The humiliation had clearly stuck with her, and now she was transferring all that old resentment onto me. I pulled out my phone, texting Dylan quickly, "Need HOA bylaws ASAP. She's trying to force entry." "Mrs. Baxter," Turner said, clearly trying to maintain professional neutrality, "I need to verify this photo. The details don't seem to match what I'm seeing here." Vivian's fake tears suddenly became more aggressive. "Are you calling me a liar, officer? I'm trying to maintain standards in this neighborhood. Do you know what happens to property values when people like him," she gestured wildly at me, "are allowed to do whatever they want? This is exactly what Frank Morrison did, questioning everything, making me look like the villain when I'm just trying to keep our community beautiful." My phone buzzed with a message from Dylan, a PDF of the HOA bylaws. I scrolled quickly to the relevant section and found exactly what I was looking for. "Officer Turner," I said, holding up my phone, "I'd like to read you Section 8, Subsection C of our HOA bylaws. No HOA board member shall enter a resident's property without written consent or a court order. Violations of this policy may result in criminal trespass charges." Vivian knows this. She helped write these bylaws. The effect was immediate. Vivian's handkerchief twisting intensified, and her face flushed beneath her makeup. She opened and closed her mouth several times, looking remarkably like a fish out of water. That's not... He's taking it out of context. I have a master key. I have the right to inspect properties for violations." Turner's expression hardened. "Mrs. Baxter, I'm not your personal enforcement officer. If Mr. Caldwell is violating HOA rules, you need to follow proper procedures. not attempt to enter his home with some key you bought off the internet. The neighbors were murmuring now, and I caught fragments of conversation. Remember when she tried this with the Johnsons? That woman is out of control. Poor Ryan. He doesn't deserve this. Henry Walsh chose that moment to speak up, his gravelly voice cutting through the chatter. Hey, Turner, while you're here, maybe you should know that Vivian sent me a $200 fine today for siding with a rule violator. All I did was wave at Ryan this morning. That sound legal to you? Turner's frown deepened even further, and he looked at Vivian with something approaching disgust. Ma'am, I think it's time you went home. If you have legitimate complaints, file them through proper channels. And that photo? He handed her phone back. I'd be very careful about presenting potentially falsified evidence. That's a serious matter. Vivian's phone suddenly lit up with a text message, and I saw her eyes widen as she read it. Her fingers flew across the screen as she typed a response, and I caught a glimpse of her muttering something about eviction proceedings. And by dawn, she gathered up her belongings with shaky hands, shoving the lipsticks and citation pads back into her designer bag. The camera was the last thing she collected, and she made sure to make a show of checking that it had recorded everything. As Turner prepared to leave, telling me to call if there were any more issues, Vivian stood by her ridiculous luxury SUV, glaring at me with undisguised hatred. This isn't over, Caldwell, she hissed, loud enough for everyone to hear. You think you're so clever with your bylaws and your smart mouth. But I know things about you. Things that will make this whole neighborhood turn against you. By tomorrow morning, you'll be begging me to let you leave quietly. She climbed into her vehicle and slammed the door hard enough to make the windows rattle. As her taillights disappeared around the corner, I stood on my porch, wondering what kind of ammunition she thought she had, and how far she was willing to go to satisfy her wounded pride. The answer, I suspected, would come sooner than I wanted. The next morning arrived with an unusual quiet that felt more ominous than peaceful. I knocked on Sofia Alvarez's door around 9, coffee in hand as a peace offering for disturbing her morning. She answered with her 8-year-old daughter, Maria, clinging to her leg, both of them still in pajamas. Sofia's face immediately softened when she saw it was me. Ryan, come in, come in. I was just thinking about calling you after last night's performance art piece by our beloved president. Her living room was warm and lived in, toys scattered across the carpet and medical textbooks piled on the coffee table. Reminders that she was juggling single motherhood with her demanding job as an emergency room nurse. As Maria ran off to play in her room, Sofia's expression darkened. She sat down heavily on the couch, pulling her knees up to her chest in a defensive posture I'd never seen from her before. You know, Ryan, I need to tell you something. 3 months ago, Vivian stood up at the HOA meeting and berated me for 20 minutes straight about my mailbox, said it was half an inch too close to the sidewalk, and the numbers weren't in the approved font. She made me stand there while she showed everyone photos, like I was some kind of criminal. Her voice cracked slightly, and she hugged her daughter tighter when Maria wandered back in. I haven't slept well since. Every time I hear a car door, I think it's her coming to find some new violation. Maria's been asking why Mommy is so jumpy. The admission hit me hard. Sofia was one of the strongest people I knew, working 12-hour shifts in the ER and raising Maria alone after her ex-husband disappeared into his gambling addiction. If Vivian had gotten to her this badly, how many other neighbors were suffering in silence? Sofia seemed to read my thoughts. But here's the thing, Ryan. I didn't take it lying down. Remember how I mentioned I'd been learning some computer stuff? She pulled out a laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. After my ex tried to hide assets during our divorce, I taught myself some basic digital investigation skills. Nothing illegal, just how to track public records and social media. And Vivian, she's not as careful online as she thinks she is. The screen was filled with screenshots of Vivian's various social media accounts and what looked like Venmo transactions. Look at this, Sofia said. pointing to a series of payments. Every month, there are these weird transfers, HOA beautification fund going out, but then personal purchases at luxury stores the next day. And these emails I found in a data breach. She's been discussing something called Project Clean Sweep with the treasurer. Mentioned your name specifically, Ryan. Says you're contaminating the neighborhood culture, just like Frank Morrison did. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about a fence violation or even a personal vendetta. This was starting to look like systematic harassment with financial motivation behind it. Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Sophia checked the peephole and smiled grimly. Speaking of allies, here comes the cavalry. She opened the door to reveal Henry Walsh, looking like an angry bear who'd been poked one too many times. The 60-year-old retired mechanic stomped in, his face red with fury. That woman, he exploded before even saying hello. $500. She fined me $500 for my Elizabeth tree. Seeing our confusion, he pulled out a crumpled paper, his hands shaking. Today's the anniversary, 5 years since my Elizabeth passed. That oak tree in my front yard, I planted it for her with her ashes. There's even a small plaque. And Vivian sent me this for unauthorized memorial installations today, of all days. Henry's eyes were wet now, and this giant of a man, who'd once lifted engine blocks with his bare hands, looked utterly broken. I'm done playing nice. Whatever you two are planning, I'm in, and I bet I can get at least a dozen other neighbors on board. The Martins, the Thompsons, the whole Peterson family. We're all sick of her reign of terror. He pulled out his phone, showing us a group text that was already buzzing with activity. Started this last night after her little show. People are sharing their stories. You wouldn't believe some of the stuff she's pulled. The three of us huddled around his phone, reading message after message. Vivian had fined someone for having the wrong shade of white on their trim. She'd tried to force the elderly Mrs. Patterson to remove her wheelchair ramp because it wasn't pre-approved. She'd even attempted to ban children from playing in their own front yards during certain hours. We need to be strategic, Sophia said, her nurse's mind already organizing our response. Ryan, she's going to call the cops on you again. It's her pattern. She always escalates. And Henry, you're probably next on her hit list after speaking up last night. As if on cue, we heard sirens in the distance. Sophia quickly pulled up her HOA account on the laptop. Look at this. There's an email here from Vivian to the board, sent at 2 a.m. She's proposing an emergency assessment, a $1,000 fee per household to cover legal costs related to addressing covenant violations. But look at the attachment. She clicked on a spreadsheet that made my stomach drop. There was my name at the top of a list labeled Priority Enforcement Targets, with a note about using the funds to pursue legal action. The sirens were getting closer. Through Sophia's window, we could see a patrol car turning onto our street. That's for you, Henry said grimly. Bet you anything she's called in another complaint. Sophia was already moving, grabbing her tablet and heading for the door. I'm getting video of whatever happens. Ryan, do you have your son on speed dial? We might need his help if she's calling 911 again. I nodded, already texting Dylan a heads up. His response was immediate. Already see the call coming in. Same caller ID. She's claiming you're disturbing the peace by conspiring against her. I'll handle it. As I stepped outside to meet whatever new drama Vivian had orchestrated, I heard Henry muttering behind me. That tree means everything to me. Elizabeth loved that tree and wanted one just like it in the yard so she could see it from her hospice bed. And Vivian knows this. She knows, and she fined me anyway on our anniversary. His voice hardened. This ends now. Whatever it takes, we're ending this. A neighbor's security camera caught the moment perfectly. The three of us standing on Sophia's porch, united against a common enemy. What we didn't know yet was that this footage would soon become crucial evidence. But first, I had to deal with whatever new accusation Vivian had manufactured. And judging by the officer's grim expression as he approached, this one was going to be worse than a photoshopped fence. The sound of Vivian's voice carried across the street from her house. She was on her phone again, and even from this distance I could hear her shrill tone. "Yes, I need to report a conspiracy. They're planning to undermine my authority. This is harassment of an elected HOA official." Dylan's text came through. "She's really going for it. Claims you're inciting a riot. Want me to play the definition of riot from the dictionary?" Despite everything, I had to smile. My son was handling this beautifully, using Vivian's own dramatic tendencies against her. But as the officer got closer and I saw the papers in his hand, my smile faded. This was escalating faster than any of us had anticipated, and Vivian was showing no signs of backing down. Sophia squeezed my shoulder as I walked toward my fate. "Remember," she whispered, "we've got evidence now. She's not the only one who can document everything." Behind us, Henry was already on his phone, rallying the neighbors. The battle lines were being drawn, and for the first time since this mess started, I felt like we might actually have a chance. The question was whether we could expose Vivian's corruption before she managed to destroy my life and terrorize anyone else who dared to stand up to her. The Fairview Heights Community Center had never seen such a packed house for an emergency HOA meeting. Every folding chair was occupied, and people lined the walls like they were attending a championship boxing match. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife, and at the center of it all stood Vivian Baxter, wielding a remote control like a scepter. She dressed for war in a power suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. Her hair shellacked into a helmet that defied gravity. The massive projection screen behind her flickered to life, and what appeared made my stomach drop to my shoes. There I was, or at least someone who looked vaguely like me, spray painting a fence in the most obnoxious shade of neon pink imaginable. The video was grainy, clearly shot from a distance, but in the dim lighting of the community center, it might as well have been evidence in a murder trial. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vivian announced, her voice dripping with false concern, "this is what Ryan Caldwell does under cover of darkness. This is the man who claims to be a respectable member of our community." The crowd erupted in murmurs, and I caught sight of several neighbors shaking their heads. Outside, I could hear chanting, and through the windows I saw something that made my heart sink further. A group of residents, maybe 15 or 20, marching in front of my house with signs. "Evict the vandal," one read. "Save our property values," proclaimed another. Someone had even taken the time to make a banner with my face on it, crossed out with a big red X. The whole scene was surreal, like something out of a bad movie about suburban warfare. Sophia stood up beside me, her tablet clutched in her hands like a shield. "I'd like to present a counter-argument," she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. The projection screen flickered as she connected her device, and suddenly Vivian's emails filled the display. There they were in black and white. Discussions about discretionary spending from the HOA Beautification Fund, receipts for luxury handbags charged to the HOA credit card, and most damning of all, an email thread discussing the purchase of her ridiculous master key using community funds. $799, Sophia read aloud, for a universal access device that turned out to be a glorified toy. The room went silent, except for the sound of Vivian's clipboard hitting the floor. Henry stood up next, his weathered face red with righteous anger. "While we're sharing evidence," he growled, "let's talk about the ring camera footage from Tuesday night." The screen changed again, showing crystal-clear video of Vivian sneaking into the HOA office at 2 in the morning, carrying boxes of files. "What were you doing there, Vivian? Having a midnight filing party?" The crowd was turning now, phones coming out to record everything. I could see the exact moment Vivian's composure cracked. Her face went from pale to red to an alarming shade of purple, and she slammed her hand on the podium hard enough to make the microphone squeal with feedback. "You don't understand," she screamed, all pretense of professionalism gone. "I did it for all of you. Do you know what happens to neighborhoods without strong leadership? They deteriorate. Property values plummet. Undesirable elements move in." She was spiraling now, pacing back and forth like a caged animal. That money wasn't stolen. It was invested. Invested in maintaining standards. That key was supposed to help me protect all of you from people like him. She pointed at me with a shaking finger. "He's just like Frank Morrison, always questioning, always undermining." Well, I won't let it happen again. I won't be humiliated by some nobody electrician who thinks he knows better than me. The meltdown was spectacular and terrifying in equal measure. Vivian grabbed her clipboard from the floor and slammed it on the podium again, papers flying everywhere like confetti. "I've sacrificed everything for this community. My time, my energy, my reputation. And this is how you repay me? By siding with him?" A neighbor in the back was live-streaming the whole thing, and I could already imagine this going viral. Vivian's carefully constructed image was crumbling in real time, and she seemed powerless to stop it. "Fine!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. "You want to see what happens without me? You'll be begging me to come back when your property values tank and criminals are running wild in the streets." I stood up slowly, letting the full weight of the moment settle before speaking. "The only thing you manage, Vivian, is chaos," I said, keeping my voice calm and steady. "You've turned neighbor against neighbor, weaponized petty rules, and stolen from the very people you claim to protect. The only criminal here is you." The room erupted. Some people were shouting support, others were booing Vivian, and Henry started a chant of "Resign! Resign!" That quickly spread through the crowd. In the chaos, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The HOA treasurer, a mousy woman named Patricia, who'd always seemed to be Vivian's shadow, was slipping out the side door with a laptop bag clutched to her chest. Vivian must have noticed too, because she suddenly stopped mid-rant and pulled out her phone. Even from across the room, I could see her hands shaking as she typed furiously. "This isn't over," she screamed over the noise. "You'll see! By tomorrow morning, Ryan Caldwell will be exposed for what he really is. I have resources you can't imagine. People who owe me favors. You've made a terrible mistake." She grabbed her designer bag and stormed toward the exit, but not before the live-streaming neighbor caught her face in perfect close-up. Makeup smeared, eyes wild. The perfect thumbnail for what would surely become the most watched video in Fairview Heights history. As the meeting dissolved into chaos, with board members trying unsuccessfully to restore order and neighbors arguing among themselves, Sophia grabbed my arm. "Patricia," she said urgently, "we need to find out what she's planning. That woman's been Vivian's accomplice in all of this." Henry appeared at my other side, still riding high on adrenaline from the confrontation. "Let them try whatever they want," he said fiercely. "After tonight, nobody's going to believe a word Vivian says, but I wasn't so sure. Desperate people do desperate things, and Vivian had just lost everything she cared about in front of the entire neighborhood. As we filed out of the community center, my phone buzzed with a text from Dylan. "Dad, you need to see this. Vivian just called someone about implementing the nuclear option." "What's the nuclear option?" I looked back at the building, where neighbors were still milling around, discussing what they'd witnessed. The war wasn't over. If anything, Vivian's very public meltdown had probably made her more dangerous. She had nothing left to lose now, and people with nothing to lose are capable of anything. The next morning started with my phone exploding with notifications at 6 a.m. sharp. Not texts or social media alerts. This was something different. An emergency HOA broadcast had been sent to every resident's email, phone, and even pushed through the community app that most of us had forgotten we'd installed. Patricia's nasal voice filled my bedroom through multiple devices simultaneously. "Attention, Fairview Heights residents. This is an urgent security notice. Ryan Caldwell of 47 Maple Street has been identified as a severe threat to community safety and property values. Evidence has surfaced of vandalism, threatening behavior, and financial irregularities. An emergency assessment of $15,000 per household is required immediately to pursue legal action and protect our community. Failure to pay within 24 hours will result in immediate lien proceedings. I sat bolt upright, my brain struggling to process the sheer audacity of what I was hearing. $15,000. They might as well have asked for $1 million. Most families in Fairview Heights were living paycheck to paycheck. This wasn't just an attack on me. It was a blatant cash grab disguised as community protection. My first instinct was to call Dylan, but his text beat me to it. Dad, I'm tracking multiple 911 calls about this broadcast. People are freaking out. Also, Vivian just called in, claiming you're harassing her again. Want me to play the recording I've been saving? I was gobsmacked at my son's foresight. He'd been documenting everything from his dispatcher position, creating an audio trail of Vivian's increasingly unhinged behavior. Sophia appeared at my door within minutes, still in her scrubs from a night shift, but wide awake with anger. "Did you see this?" She held up her phone, showing the broadcast message. But here's the interesting part. Remember that text Vivian got during the first police visit? The one that made her face go white? That was me. She grinned fiercely, a look that would have been at home on a warrior heading into battle. I may have created a burner phone and sent her a message implying I knew about her embezzlement. I wanted to see how she'd react, and boy, did she take the bait? The pieces were falling into place. Vivian's escalating behavior wasn't just about control. She was running scared, trying to grab as much money as possible before her house of cards collapsed. Henry arrived next, looking like he'd aged 5 years overnight. "Ryan, they cut my power," he said, his voice shaking with rage. "I went to make coffee this morning, and nothing, called the utility company, and they said there was a stop order from the HOA for non-payment of fees. Fees I've never even heard of. This was new? HOAs had a lot of power, but interfering with utility services? That crossed a line from annoying to potentially criminal. I grabbed my phone to call Dylan again, but the screen went black. My own power had just been cut. In the sudden silence, without even the hum of the refrigerator, we could hear sirens approaching once again. "She's completely lost it," Sophia muttered, pulling out her tablet. "But she's making mistakes. Big ones. Look at this. She's calling 911 from the parking lot of the community center. I can see her car on the traffic cam." Sure enough, there was Vivian's ridiculous SUV, parked haphazardly across 2 spaces while she gesticulated wildly inside. Dylan's voice came through Sophia's phone. He'd conferenced us in while handling Vivian's latest call. "Ma'am, you're reporting harassment, but our GPS shows you're not even at your home. Can you explain why you're calling from the community center parking lot?" Vivian's response was a shriek that made us all wince. "I don't have to explain anything. Ryan Caldwell is destroying this community. He's turned everyone against me. I demand action immediately." What happened next was beautiful in its simplicity. Dylan, my brilliant son, began playing back audio from Vivian's previous calls. Her voice echoed through the phone, creating a bizarre stereo effect as past Vivian talked over present. "Vivian, I need units at Henry Walsh's house immediately. His memorial tree is a code violation." Then another. "Sophia Alvarez is harboring anti-HOA sentiment. She needs to be investigated." And another. "The Thompsons' children were playing in their yard at 4:15 p.m. This is disturbing the peace." The pattern was clear. Vivian had been using 911 as her personal harassment hotline for months. Present, Vivian went silent, apparently realizing she was being confronted with her own words. The power suddenly flickered back on, and my phone rang immediately. It was Officer Turner, and he sounded exhausted. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm in the parking lot with Mrs. Baxter. She's admitted to orchestrating the power cuts. Says it was necessary to maintain order. I've got state authorities on the way. This is way beyond local jurisdiction now. Through the window, I could see neighbors emerging from their houses, all looking confused and angry about the power situation. Several were heading toward the community center parking lot. Drawn by the flashing lights and the spectacle of Vivian's latest meltdown, Turner continued, "That broadcast this morning? The state has an HOA fraud hotline. This triggered about 50 calls in an hour. They're very interested in Mrs. Baxter and her treasurer." Dylan's voice came through Sophia's phone again, and for the first time, I heard emotion creeping through his professional dispatcher demeanor. "Dad, I need to tell you something. I've been documenting all of this for months. Every call, every threat, every abuse of the emergency system. I didn't tell you because I wanted to handle it myself, to prove I could do something important with this job. But when she started coming after you," his voice broke slightly, "I couldn't just sit by and watch her destroy our home. I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." My eyes welled up with tears. My son, barely 19, had been protecting not just me, but the entire neighborhood from his dispatcher desk. "Dylan," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "you have nothing to apologize for. You're the hero here. You've saved us all." Through the phone, I could hear him sniffle, and then his professional voice returned. "Copy that, Dad. Oh, and Vivian's trying to call again. Should I let it go through?" We could all hear Vivian's voice in the background, demanding to speak to a supervisor, claiming the entire dispatch center was conspiring against her. Turner's dry voice cut through. "Ma'am, accusing 911 dispatchers of conspiracy is a serious allegation. Would you like to add that to your growing list of charges?" The sound of Vivian's coffee hitting the ground was audible even from inside my house. As we stood in my kitchen, the three of us exhausted but oddly exhilarated, Sophia's tablet pinged with a notification. "The HOA board just sent an emergency notice," she read. "They're suspending Vivian and Patricia pending investigation, freezing all HOA accounts, and canceling the $15,000 assessment." Henry actually smiled for the first time in days. "Good, but she's not done yet. People like Vivian always have one more card to play." As if on cue, Dylan's voice came through one more time. "Dad, Vivian just said something about having dirt on you. Something about your work history. She's claiming she's going to expose you at the emergency meeting tonight." My blood ran cold. There was nothing scandalous in my work history, but Vivian had proven she was willing to fabricate evidence. What story was she planning to spin now? And would anyone believe it after everything that had happened? The emergency meeting that night was a complete circus before it even started. News of the morning's broadcast and power cut debacle had spread through Fairview Heights like wildfire, and it seemed like every resident had decided to attend. But this wasn't just a neighborhood affair anymore. Parked outside the community center was a news van from the local TV station, and a reporter with perfectly coiffed hair was interviewing angry residents. The presence of media changed everything. This wasn't just about our little HOA drama anymore. Vivian's meltdown was about to become regional news. I arrived with Sophia and Henry flanking me like bodyguards, and we had to push through a crowd just to get to the door. Inside, the scene was even more chaotic. Officer Turner stood near the front with two state investigators, their badges gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights. Vivian sat at the board table, but her usual position of power was undermined by the way other board members had physically distanced themselves from her, leaving her isolated at one end like a defendant at trial. She clutched that ridiculous neon green key like a talisman, turning it over and over in her hands. The moment she saw me, her face contorted with rage. But there was something else there, too. Fear, Patricia, the treasurer, was notably absent, and rumor had it she'd already been taken in for questioning about the HOA's financial irregularities. Before anyone could call the meeting to order, Officer Turner announced, "I need to inform everyone that this meeting is being recorded as part of an ongoing investigation into misuse of emergency services and potential fraud. The reporter from outside had somehow gotten in and was setting up in the corner. Camera ready. Vivian shot to her feet, pointing at the camera. "No media! This is a private HOA matter!" The reporter, a sharp-looking woman in her 30s, didn't miss a beat. "Actually, ma'am, when you sent that broadcast this morning demanding $15,000 from every household, you made this very public. Care to comment on the allegations of embezzlement?" The room froze. It was like watching a tennis match where someone had just served a grenade instead of a ball. Vivian's mouth opened and closed several times before she managed to speak. "I don't have to answer to you. This is about Ryan Caldwell and his criminal behavior. I have evidence that he's been falsifying his electrical work, overcharging residents, and using his son's position to avoid consequences." The accusation was so absurd that several people actually laughed. Mrs. Thompson, whose house I'd rewired last year for barely more than the cost of materials, stood up. "Ryan gave us a 50% discount because my husband had just lost his job. He's the most honest contractor in this neighborhood." That's when I played my ace. "Speaking of evidence," I said, pulling out my phone, "I think everyone should hear this." Sophia's recording from that morning filled the room. Vivian in her car, admitting to the broadcast scam, confessing to the power cuts, ranting about how she'd destroy anyone who stood in her way. The quality was crystal clear, every damning word audible. But the real shock came when Dylan's voice joined the recording. Playing back Vivian's previous 911 calls, the room listened in stunned silence as call after call played out, each one more petty and vindictive than the last. "Building a case," Vivian's voice said in one call. "These people need to learn their place." Sophia stood up next, her tablet connected to the projection screen. "I'd like to point out," she said, her voice sharp as a scalpel, "that Vivian Baxter has called 911 47 times in the last 6 months. 47, and not one was a real emergency. She's weaponized our emergency services against her neighbors." The screen filled with call logs, each one time-stamped and categorized. The pattern was undeniable. Henry had been targeted 5 times. The Thompsons 7 times, even poor Mrs. Patterson in her wheelchair had warranted 3 calls. "You're a liar, Vivian, and we're done with you," Sophia said, pointing at Vivian with the fury of someone who'd been pushed too far. The crowd erupted in agreement, and that's when Henry made his move. The old mechanic stood up slowly, reaching into his jacket pocket. For a moment, Vivian looked genuinely frightened, but what he pulled out was just a photograph, worn and creased from being carried everywhere. It showed a smiling woman standing next to a young oak tree. "This is my Elizabeth," he said, his voice carrying despite its quietness. "She died 5 years ago today. That tree in my yard, she asked me to plant it so she could see something beautiful from her hospice bed. And you," he turned to Vivian, his eyes blazing, "you fined me $500 for it on our anniversary. You knew what that tree meant, and you fined me anyway." The room had gone dead silent. Except for the quiet whir of the news camera, Henry pulled out a manila folder next. "But you made a mistake, Vivian. You made enemies of good people. And good people fight back." He opened the folder to reveal a petition. Pages and pages of signatures. 237 households, Vivian. That's 94% of the HOA. We're not just asking you to resign, we're demanding it. This is the voice of everyone you've bullied, everyone you've fined, everyone you've tried to crush under your designer heels. The cheer that went up was deafening. People were on their feet, applauding, some even crying. It was like watching a dictator fall. If dictators wore too much perfume and carried neon green toys, Officer Turner stepped forward, and the room quieted again. "Mrs. Baxter, I need to inform you that the state has opened a formal investigation into your actions. The misuse of 911 services alone carries serious penalties. Add in the fraud allegations, the utility tampering, and what appears to be significant legal consequences. Vivian had gone pale, her knuckles white as she gripped her key. But I was protecting property values. I was maintaining standards. They don't understand what this neighborhood was like before I took control. Turner's expression didn't change. I'm an officer, not your errand boy, Vivian. And from what I've seen, the only thing you've been protecting is your own bank account. The reporter stepped forward, microphone in hand. Mrs. Baxter, do you have any comment on the allegations that you used HOA funds to purchase personal items, including what neighbors are calling a glow stick key? Vivian's composure finally shattered completely. She stood up so fast her chair fell over, clutching her key defensively against her chest. You're all ungrateful idiots. I made this neighborhood what it is. Without me, you're nothing. She started backing toward the door, dodging between the cameras and the crowd. I'll sue every last one of you. I have lawyers. I have connections. If you think you've won, I'll be back. And when I am, you'll beg for mercy. But her dramatic exit was cut short when she backed directly into two state investigators who'd been waiting by the door. Mrs. Baxter, one of them said calmly, we're going to need you to come with us. You have the right to remain silent. The rest of the Miranda rights were drowned out by Vivian's shrieking about conspiracies and injustice. As they led her out, still clutching that ridiculous key, she caught sight of me one last time. The look in her eyes promised that this wasn't over. That somehow, some way, she'd find a way to make me pay. The question was whether she'd have that chance, or if justice would finally catch up with the woman who'd terrorized Fairview Heights for far too long. The meeting continued after Vivian's removal, but it felt more like a celebration than official business. The board voted unanimously to suspend all recent fines, return any collected fees, and institute new oversight measures. As people started to filter out, sharing stories and contact information for the inevitable legal proceedings, I noticed an envelope tucked under my windshield wiper. My name was written on it in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a chilling message that made my blood run cold. But that's a story of what happened next. After we thought the nightmare was over, the final emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. the following evening. But by 6:30, the parking lot was already overflowing. The atmosphere was different. This wasn't about drama anymore. This was about justice. I arrived with my usual crew, but our numbers had grown. At least 50 families walked together, united in purpose. Inside, the state investigators had taken over the board table. With official documents spread before them, Vivian sat at a separate table with a harried-looking lawyer who kept checking his watch. Her precious neon green key sat on the table in front of her. No longer a symbol of authority, but evidence of her delusions. Before anyone could call the meeting to order, Henry strode to the front with a thick manila folder. "I've got something to say," he announced. He pulled out pages of flyers that Ryan, Sophia, and he had been distributing all day. Every household in Fairview Heights now knows exactly what Vivian Baxter has done. The theft, the broadcast scam, the abuse of emergency services. All of it. But more importantly, this petition contains 237 signatures demanding Vivian's immediate removal and criminal prosecution. The crowd murmured approval as he waved the bound document. "This is for you, Elizabeth," he whispered, touching his pocket where her photo rested. The state investigator stood up. "Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Now, Mrs. Baxter, you called this meeting to present evidence against Mr. Caldwell. You have 5 minutes." Vivian shot to her feet, knocking over her water glass. "Ryan Caldwell is a fraud," she screeched. "I have proof that he overcharged Mrs. Williams for electrical work 3 years ago, and his son, that delinquent dispatcher, has been sabotaging me from the beginning." The evidence was pathetic. Receipts that actually showed I'd undercharged. Blurry photos that proved nothing. But then her face changed as a realization dawned. "That was your son's voice on 911?" she gasped, pointing at me with a shaking finger. "All those times, it was him. You planned this from the start." Dylan chose that moment to enter, wearing his dispatcher uniform and carrying a thick folder. "Ma'am, I was doing my job," he said calmly. "You're the one who chose to abuse the emergency system. I just made sure there was a record of it." He handed the folder to the state investigator. "This is my formal report. 47 fraudulent calls, all documented." The investigator's expression grew more severe with each page she read. Henry couldn't resist. "Your glow stick key didn't open our eyes, Vivian. You did that all by yourself." The laughter that followed seemed to break whatever remained of Vivian's composure. The board voted unanimously to remove her from her position. The state announced she would be fined $20,000 and permanently banned from serving on any HOA board in the state. As Officer Turner moved to escort her out, she clutched her key desperately. "This isn't over. I'll appeal. I'll sue." But nobody was listening anymore. The nightmare was finally over. Later that evening, Dylan, Sophia, Henry, and I gathered at my house for an impromptu celebration. Pizza boxes covered my kitchen table, and the mood was lighter than it had been in months. "You know what the best part is?" Henry said, raising his beer. "That tree of mine, it's going to outlive her legacy here." Several people had approached me about serving on the new board, and after some prodding from Sophia and Henry, I agreed to attend the next meeting as an observer. It felt like a new beginning for Fairview Heights, one built on transparency and mutual respect instead of fear and intimidation. Dylan pulled me aside afterward, and we stepped onto the back porch. "Dad, I'm sorry I didn't tell you about the dispatcher job sooner. I just wanted to prove I could handle something important on my own." I pulled my son into a hug, feeling prouder than I'd ever been. "You saved this entire neighborhood, Dylan. You're a hero." He grinned, looking more like the kid I remembered. "Does this mean I get out of mowing the lawn this weekend?" We were still laughing when I noticed an envelope tucked under my doormat. Plain white paper with my name in unfamiliar handwriting. Inside was a single line that made my blood run cold. "Fairview Heights isn't done with you." But as I looked around at my friends, my son, and my home, all safe from Vivian's tyranny, I crumpled the note and tossed it in the trash. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. After all, we'd already taken down one tyrant. The state investigator had mentioned something about a broader investigation into HOA corruption across Ohio. Maybe Vivian was just the tip of the iceberg. But tonight, we'd won. Tonight, Fairview Heights was free. And that mysterious letter? It could wait until morning. For now, we had a victory to celebrate and a community to rebuild. What did we learn today? Probably nothing. But it was fun, wasn't it? Show some love with a like. And don't forget to subscribe.